Hello there, Mexican American literature and culture. This is Miss Alba once again here to read for you. Today we're going to be reading one of my favorite short stories of all time by one of my favorite authors of all time, Sandra Cisneros. Sandra Cisneros is she's still alive. She's one of probably like our national treasures. She is, she wrote The House on Mango Street and Woman Hollering Creek. And Woman Hollering Creek is a collection of short stories. And within these short stories, Sandra Cisneros does quite a bit of connecting the reader to folklore. In other words, connecting the reader through to culture of everyday people. Folklore is simply that. We usually think of folklore as something that you put on and you bedazzle the folklorico outfits. We think of mariachis, but actually folklore is just comes from the German, right? Folk, people, and lore is beliefs. So folklore is essentially how we express our cultural beliefs, not just Mexicans, but every culture in everyday life. One of the ways that we've already studied folklore is through corridos. Corridos are a way that we, once again, express belief. Regular everyday people express belief, express ideas, is through music, through storytelling in music, corridos in particular. Today we're going to look at how Mexican American authors draw inspiration to folklore, to everyday, the people, the beliefs and the ideas that they grew up with, and how those influence their writing, their stories, and what they are, the people that they are representing in their writing. So I'm going to read to you this particular piece, but I want you to think about everything you already know. So whether you're Mexican American or not, by now you've learned this last week quite a bit about the character in folklore of La Llorona. And you know that La Llorona, once again, she's very similar to a corrido hero because she is a person who was betrayed. And because of that betrayal, she retaliated through violence, just like the corrido hero. However, her end is much different, right? We celebrate corrido heroes. They are hailed as examples of bravery and courage, but La Llorona isn't. La Llorona is something that we use to fear, to put fear in people, to control little kids. Whenever I want to scare my child and I want them to clean up their toys, I say, you know what, girl, you better go do your thing. You better go clean up those toys because I'm going to call La Llorona and she's going to come and get you. True. No, I'm just kidding. I don't do that to my daughter, but that's what my mom used to do. My mom used to love, she taught me everything I know through fear. So today we're going to read La Llorona. We're going to read Woman Hollering Creek. And every single time when we do a pause in this video, I want you to tell me where you see something in the story that reminds you of La Llorona. So I'm excited because it's wonderful to see something and recognize yourself and recognize your grandparents and recognize perhaps your parents or something that you've learned before in the reading. And that's how allusions work. So we're learning about La Llorona because we're also learning about allusions. And here is handy dandy Wikipedia. An allusion is we're going to be considering, I'm going to share my screen, considering how Cisneros uses allusions of La Llorona to communicate her theme, to communicate, to show us meaning, to help us create meaning as readers. So let's begin. Okay, I'm still recording. Okay, so I'm going to read you the story, and as we go, we are going to you're going to follow the dot. There it is. There's my dot. Still learning. Thank you for being patient. Okay, so as we read this story, the video will be pausing and you will be jotting down where you heard an example, a quote, or where you read something that reminds you of La Llorona. So let's get started. Where is my story? Let me pause my video so I could get set up. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. As we are reading, you are going to notice, can you recognize allusions to La Llorona in Sandra Cisneros' short story, Woman Hollering Creek? So here we go. Woman Hollering Creek from Sandra Cisneros' book of short stories, Woman Hollering Creek, vintage, New York Vintage Publications, 1991. It begins like this. The day Don Serafín gave Juan Pedro Martínez Sánchez permission to take Cleofilas Enriqueta de León Hernández as his bride across her father's threshold over several miles of dirt road and several miles of paved over one border and beyond to a town en el otro lado, on the other side. Already did he divine the morning his daughter would raise her hand over her eyes, look south, and dream of returning to the chores that never ended, 6 good-for-nothing brothers, and 1 old man's complaints. He had said, after all, in the hubbub of parting, I am your father. I will never abandon you. He had said that, hadn't he? When he hugged and then let her go. But at the moment, Cleofilas was busy looking for Chela, her maid of honor, to fulfill their bouquet conspiracy. She would not remember her father's parting words until later. I am your father. I will never abandon you. Only now as a mother did she remember, now when she and Juan Pedrito sat by the creek's edge, how when a man and a woman love each other, sometimes that love sours. But a parent's love for a child for its parents, is another thing entirely. So already this is starting to make me think of, right, a parent's love for their children. This kind of makes me think of La Llorona because to a certain extent, that's what disturbs us about La Llorona, is that this is what the love between a parent's love for a child and a child for its parents, right? It's another thing entirely, hopefully. This is what Cleofilas thought evenings when Juan Pedro did not come home, and she lay on her side of the bed, listening to the hollow roar of the interstate, a distant dog barking, the pecan trees rustling like ladies in stiff petticoats. Shh, shh, soothing her to sleep. In the town where she grew up, there isn't much to do except to accompany the aunts and the godmothers to the house of one or the other to play cards, or walk to the cinema to see this week's film again, speckled with one hair quivering annoyingly on the screen, or to the center of town to order a milkshake that will appear in a day and a half as a pimple on her backside, or to her girlfriend's house to watch the latest telenovela episode and try to copy the way the women comb their hair and wear their makeup. But what Cleofilas has been waiting for, has been whispering and sighing and giggling for, has been anticipating since she was old enough to lean against the window displays of gauze and butterflies and lace, is passion. Not the kind on the cover of the Alarma magazines, mind you, where the lover is photographed with the bloody fork she used to salvage her good name, but passion in its purest crystalline essence. The kind the books and the songs and the telenovelas describe when one finds, finally, the great love of one's life and does whatever one can do, must do at whatever the cost. Tú o nadie, you or no one. The title of the current favorite telenovela. The beautiful Lucia Mendez having to put up with all kinds of hardship of the heart. Separation and betrayal, loving and always loving no matter what, because that is the most important thing. And did you see Lucia Mendez on the Bayer aspirin commercials? Wasn't she lovely? Does she dye her hair, do you think? Cleofilas is going to go to the farmacia and buy a hair rinse, and her girlfriend Chela, she will apply it, and it is not difficult at all. Because you didn't watch last night's episode when Lucia confessed she loved him more than anyone in her life, and she sings the song, You or No One, in the beginning and the end of the show. Tú o nadie. Somehow one ought to live one's life like that, don't you think? You or no one. Because to suffer for love is good. The pain all sweet somehow in the end. Does that remind you of La Llorona? If so, why? Moving on. Seguin. She had liked the sound of it. It was far away and lovely. Not like Monclova, Coahuila. Ugly. Seguin, Texas. A nice sterling ring to it. The tinkle of money. She would get to wear outfits like the women on the tele, like Lucia Mendez, and have a lovely house. And oh, wouldn't Chela be jealous? And yes, they will drive all the way to Laredo to get her wedding dress. And that's what they say, because Juan Pedro wants to get married right away without a long engagement, since he can't take off too much time from work. Well, he was a very important person in Seguin with a beer company, I think. Or was it tires? Yes, he has to be back. And so they will get married in the spring when he can take off work. And when they will drive off in his new pickup. Did you see it? To their new home in Seguin. Well, not exactly new, but they're going to repaint the house. You know, newlyweds, new paint, new furniture. Why not? He can afford it. And later on, or maybe add a room for two of the children. Maybe. May they be blessed with many. Now here I'm starting to notice that the language is changing. And it sounds like chisme. It sounds like gossip. It sounds like people sharing gossip. And again, to me, this kind of reminds me of La Llorona, even though maybe it's not directly alluding to the La Llorona, but this idea of how stories are repeated from voice to voice. Well, on with the next one. You'll see Cleofilas has always been so good with her sewing machine. A little of the machine and sus, miracles. She's always been so clever, that girl. Poor thing. And without even a mama to advise her on things like her wedding night, well, may God help her. That with the father with the head like a burro and those 6 clumsy brothers. Well, what do you think? Well, yes, I'm going to the wedding, of course. The dress I want to wear just needs to be altered a teensy bit to bring it up to date. You see, I saw a new style last night that I thought would suit me. Did you watch last night's episode of The Rich Also Cry? Well, did you notice what the mother was wearing? The rich also cry. Who cries? And these are all Mexican soap opera names. It's interesting. All these crying women. La Gritona. Such a funny name for such a lovely arroyo. But that's what they called the creek that ran behind the house, though no one would say whether the woman had hollered from anger or pain. The natives only knew the arroyo one crossed on the way to San Antonio, and then once again on the way back was called Woman Hollering, a name no one from these parts questioned, and little less understood. Oh, pues allá de los indios, quién sabe? Who knows? The town people shrugged, because it was of no concern to their lives how this trickle of water received its curious name. What do you want to know for? Trini, the laundromat attendant, asked in the same gruff Spanish she always used when she gave Cleofilas change or yelled at her for something. First, for putting too much soap in the machines, and later for sitting on the washer, and still later, after Juan Pedrito was born, for not understanding that in this country you cannot let your baby walk around with no diaper and his pee-pee hanging out. It wasn't nice, ¿entiendes? Pues, well, how could Cleofilas explain to a woman like this why the name of Woman Hollering fascinated her? Well, there was no sense talking to Trini. On the other hand, there were the neighbor ladies, one on either side of the house they rented near the arroyo. The woman Soledad on the left, the woman Dolores on the right. The neighbor lady liked to call herself a widow, though. How she came to be one was a mystery. Her husband had either died or run away with the nice house floozy or simply gone out for cigarettes one afternoon. Never came back. It was hard to say which, since Soledad, as a rule, didn't mention him. In the other house, lived La Señora Dolores. Kind of very sweet, but her house smelled too much of incense and candles from the altars that burned continuously in memory of 2 sons who had died in the last war and the husband who died shortly after from grief. The neighbor lady, Dolores, divided her time between the memory of these men and her garden, famous for its sunflowers, so tall they had to be supported with broom handles and old boards. Red coxcombs, fringed and bleeding, a thick menstrual color, and especially roses whose sad scent reminded Cleofilas of the dead. Each Sunday, La Señora Dolores clipped the most beautiful of these flowers and arranged them on 3 modest headstones at the Seguin cemetery. The neighbor ladies, Soledad, Dolores, they might have known once the name of the arroyo before it turned English, but they did not know. They were too busy remembering the men who had left through either choice or circumstance and would never come back. Pain or rage, Cleofilas wondered when she drove over the bridge the first time as a newlywed, and Juan Pedro had pointed out La Gritona, he had said, and she had laughed. Such a funny name for a creek so pretty and full of happily ever after. La Gritona. Now, does that remind you of La Llorona? Where is the allusion? The first time she had been so surprised, she didn't cry out or try to defend herself. She'd always said that she would strike back if a man, any man, were to strike her. But when the moment came and he slapped her once, and then again and again, until the lips split and bled an orchid of blood, she didn't fight back. She didn't break into tears. She didn't run away as she imagined she might when she saw such things in telenovelas. In her own home, her parents had never raised a hand to each other or to their children, although she admitted she may have been brought up with a little leniently as an only daughter, la consentida, the princess. There were some things she would never tolerate, ever. Instead, when it happened the first time, when they were barely man and wife, she had been so stunned, left her speechless, motionless, numb. She had done nothing but reach up to the heat of her mouth and stare at the blood on her hand as if it, even then, she didn't understand. She could think of nothing to say. She said nothing. She just stroked the dark curls of the man who wept and would weep like a child, his tears of repentance and shame, this time in each. So can you recognize allusions to La Llorona? Take a moment and think about it. The men at the ice house, from what she can tell, from the times during her first year when she's still a newlywed, she's invited and accompanies her husband, still sits mute beside their conversation. She waits and she sips a beer until it grows warm, and she twists a paper napkin into a knot, into a fan, one into a rose. She nods her head, she smiles, she yawns politely grins. She laughs at the appropriate moments. She leans against her husband's sleeve, she tugs at his elbow, and finally she becomes good at predicting where the talk will lead. And from this, Cleofilas concludes, each is nightly trying to find the truth lying at the bottom of the bottle, like a gold doubloon on the seafloor. They want to tell each other what they want to tell themselves. But what is bumping like a helium balloon at the ceiling of the brain never finds its way out. It bubbles and it rises. It gurgles in the throat. It rolls across the surface of the tongue and erupts from the lips. A belch. If they are lucky, there are tears at the end of the long night. At any given moment, the fists try to speak. They are dogs chasing their own tails before lying down to sleep, trying to find a way, a route, an out, and finally get some peace. In the morning, before he opens his eyes, or after they have finished loving, or at times when he's simply across from her at the table putting pieces of food into his mouth and chewing, Cleofilas thinks, this is the man I waited my whole life for. Not that he isn't a good man. She has to remind herself why she loves him when she changes the baby's pampers and when she mops the bathroom floor, or she tries to take the curtains for the doorways without doors or white linen, or wonder a little when she kicks the refrigerator and says he hates this shitty house and is going out where he won't be bothered. The baby's howling and her suspicious questions and her request to fix this and this and this, because if she had any brains in her head, she'd realize he's been up before the rooster earning his living to pay for the food in her belly and the roof over her head, and would have to wake up again early the next day. So why can't you just leave me in peace, woman? He's not very tall, no, and he doesn't look like the man on the telenovelas. His face is still all scarred from acne, and he has a little bit of a belly from all the beer he drinks. Well, he's always been husky. This man who farts and belches and snores as well as laughs and kisses and holds her. Somehow, this husband whose whiskers she finds each morning in the sink, whose shoes she must air each evening on the porch, this husband who cuts his fingernails in public, who laughs loudly and curses like a man and demands each course of dinner be served on a separate plate like at his mother's, as soon as he gets home on time or late, and who doesn't care at all for music or telenovelas or romance or roses or the moon floating pearly above the arroyo or through the bedroom window for that matter. Shut the blinds and go back to sleep. This father, this man, this rival, this keeper, this lord, this master, this husband, till kingdom come. A doubt, slender as hair, a washed cup, set back on the shelf, wrong side up, her lipstick, and body talc, and hairbrush, all arranged in the bathroom, a different way. No, her imagination, the house the same as always, nothing. Coming home from the hospital with her new son, her husband, something comforting in discovering her house slippers beneath the bed, the faded housecoat where she left it on the bathroom hook, her pillow, their bed. Sweet, sweet homecoming, sweet as the scent of face powder in the air, jasmine, sticky liquor, smudged fingerprint on the door, crushed cigarette in a glass, wrinkle in the brain crumpling to a crease. Sometimes she thinks of her father's house. But how could she go back there? What a disgrace. What would the neighbors say? Coming home like that with one baby on her hip and another one in the oven. Where's your husband? In town of gossips, town of dust and despair, which she has traded for this town of gossips, this town of dust and despair. Houses farther apart, perhaps, though no more privacy because of it. No leafy zócalo in the center of town, though the murmur of talk is clear enough all the same. No huddled whispering on the church steps each Sunday, because here the whispering begins at sunset at the ice house instead. This town, with its silly pride for a bronze peacock the size of a baby, the carriage in front of the city hall, TV, repair shop, drugstore, hardware, dry cleaners, chiropractors, liquor store, bail bonds, empty storefront, and nothing of interest. Nothing one could walk to at any rate, because the towns here are built so that you have to depend on husbands, or you stay home, or you drive if you're rich enough to allowed to drive your own car. There's no place to go, unless one counts the neighbor ladies. Soledad on one side, Dolores on the other, or the creek. Don't go out there after dark, mijita. Stay near the house. No es bueno para la salud. Mala suerte, bad luck, mal aire. You'll get sick, and the baby too. You'll catch a fright wandering about in the dark, and then you'll see how right we were. The stream sometimes only a muddy puddle in the summer, though now in the springtime, because of the rains, it's a good size, alive thing. A thing with the voice all its own, all day and all night, calling in its high silver voice. Is it La Llorona, the weeping woman? La Llorona who drowned her own children? Perhaps La Llorona is the one they named the creek after, she thinks, remembering all the stories she learned as a child. La Llorona, calling to her. She is sure of it. Cleofilas sets the baby's Donald Duck blanket on the grass. She listens, the day sky turning to night, the baby pulling up fistfuls of grass and laughing. La Llorona. She wonders if something as quiet as this drives a woman to the darkness under the trees. What she needs is, and he made a gesture as if to yank a woman's buttocks to his groin. Maximiliano, foul-smelling fool, from across the road said this, and then he set the man laughing, but Cleofilas just muttered grosero, and she went on washing dishes. She knew he said not because it was true, but more because it was he who needed to sleep with the woman instead of drinking each night at the ice house and stumbling home alone. Maximiliano, who was said to have killed his wife in an ice house brawl when she came at him with the mop. I had to shoot, he said. She was armed. Their laughter outside the window, her husband's, his friends, Manolo, Beto, Efraín, El Perico, Maximiliano. Was Cleofilas just exaggerating, as her husband always said? It seemed like the newspapers were full of such stories. This woman found on the other side of the interstate, and this one pushed from a moving car, this one's cadaver, this one's unconscious, this one's beaten blue, her ex-husband, her husband, her lover, her father, her brother, her uncle, her friend, her co-worker. Always the same grisly news in the pages of the dailies. She dunked a glass under the soapy water for a moment, and then she shivered. Notice water. He had thrown a book, hers, from across the room. A halt welt across her cheek. She could forgive that. But what stung more was the fact that it was her book, a love story by Corintellado, that which she loved most now that she lived in the U.S. without a television set, without telenovelas. Except now and again when her husband was away and she could manage it, the few episodes glimpsed at the neighbor lady Soledad's house, because Dolores didn't care for that sort of thing, though Soledad was often kind enough to retell what had happened on that episode of Maria de Nadie, poor Argentinian country girl who had the ill fortune of falling in love with the beautiful son of the Arrocha family, the very family she worked for, whose roof she slept under and whose floors she vacuumed, while in the same house with the dust brooms and the floor cleaners as witnesses, the square-jawed Juan Carlos Arrocha had uttered words of love. I love you, Maria. Listen to me, mi querida. But it was she who had to say, no, we are not of the same class, and to remind him it was not his place nor hers to fall in love, while all the while her heart was breaking. Can you imagine? Cleofilas thought her life would have to be like that, like a telenovela. Only now the episodes just got sadder and sadder. And there were no commercials between for comic relief. No happy ending in sight. She thought this when she sat with the baby out by the creek behind the house. Cleofilas de... but somehow she would have to change her name to Topacio or Yesenia or Cristal, Adriana, Estefania, Andrea, something more poetic than Cleofilas. Everything happened to women with names like Jules, but what happened to Cleofilas? Nothing but a crack in the face. Because the doctor had said so. She has to go to make sure the new baby is all right. Well, so there won't be any problems when he's born. And the appointment card says next Tuesday. Could he please take her? That's all. No, she won't mention it. She promises if the doctor asks, she can say that she fell down from the steps or she slipped when she was out in the backyard. Slipped out the back. She could tell him that she was to go back next Tuesday. Juan Pedro, please, for the new baby, for their child. She could write to her father and ask maybe for money, just the loan for the new baby's medical expenses. Well, then if he'd rather she didn't, all right, she won't. Oh, please don't. Please don't. She knows it's difficult saving money with all the bills they have, but how else are they going to get out of debt with the truck payments? And after the rent and the food and the electricity and the gas and the water and who knows what, well, there's hardly anything left. But please, at least for this doctor's visit, she won't ask for anything else. She has to. Why is she so anxious? Because because she is going to make sure that that baby is not turned around backward this time to split her down the center. Yes, next Tuesday, 5:30, I'll have Juan Pedrito dressed and ready, but those are the only ones he has. I'll polish them and we'll be ready as soon as you come home from work. We won't make you ashamed. Feliz. It's me, Graciela. No, I can't talk louder. I'm at work. Look, I kind of need a favor. There's a patient, a lady here who's got a problem. Well, wait a minute. Are you listening to me or what? Well, I can't talk real loud because her husband's in the next room. Well, could you just listen? Well, I was going to do the sonogram on her. She's pregnant, right? And she just starts crying on me. Híjole, Feliz, this poor lady. She's got black and blue marks all over. No, I'm not kidding. Well, from her husband. Who else? Another one of those brides from across the border. Her family's all in Mexico. Shit, you think they're going to help her? Give me a break. This lady doesn't even speak English. She hasn't even been allowed to call home or write or nothing. That's why I'm calling you. Well, she needs a ride. Well, not to Mexico, you goof. Just to the Greyhound in San Anto. No, just a ride. She's got her own money. All you have to do is drop her off in San Antonio on your way home. Oh, come on, Feliz. Please. Well, if we don't help her, who will? Well, I'll drive her myself, but she needs to be on that bus before her husband gets home from work. What do you say? I don't know. Wait. Okay, right away. Tomorrow even. Well, if tomorrow's no good for you. Okay, it's the date, Feliz. Thursday at the cash and carry off the I-10. Noon. Okay, she'll be ready. Oh, and her name's Cleofilas. Well, I don't know. One of those Mexican saints, I guess. Martyr or something. Cleofilas. 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 Yes, write it down. Thanks, Feliz. Yeah, when her kid's born, she'll have to name her after us, right? Yeah, you got it. Regular soap opera sometimes. Que vida, comadre. Bueno, bye. All morning, that flutter of half fear and half doubt. At any moment, Juan Pedro might appear in the doorway on the street at the cash and carry, like in the dreams she dreamed. There was that to think about, yes, until the woman in the pickup drove up. Then there wasn't time to think about anything, but the pickup pointed toward San Antonio. Put your bags in the back and get in. But when they drove across the arroyo, the river opened her mouth and it let out a yell as loud as any mariachi, which startled not only Cleofilas, but Juan Pedrito as well. Pues how cute. I scared you too, right? Well, sorry. I should have warned you. Every time I cross that bridge, I do that because of the name, you know? Woman hollering, pues I holler. Well, she said this in Spanish puck with English, and she laughed. Did you ever notice, Feliz continued, how nothing around here is named after a woman? Really? Unless she's the virgin. I guess you're only famous if you're a virgin. And she was laughing again. Well, that's why I like the name of that arroyo. Makes you want to holler like Tarzan, right? Everything about this woman, this Feliz, amazed Cleofilas. The fact that she drove a pickup, mind you. But when Cleofilas asked if it was her husband, she said she didn't have a husband. The pickup was hers. She herself had chosen it. She herself was paying for it. I used to have a Pontiac Sunburn, but those cars, they're for viejas, pussy cars. Now this is a real car. What kind of talk was that coming from a woman? Cleofilas thought. But then again, Feliz was like no other woman she'd ever met. Can you imagine? When we crossed the arroyo, she just started yelling like a crazy. She would later say to her fathers and brothers, just like that. Who would have thought? Who would have? Pain or rage, perhaps, but not a hoot like the one Feliz had just let go. makes you want to holler, like Tarzan, Feliz had said. And then Feliz began laughing again. But it wasn't Feliz laughing. It was a gurgling out of her own throat. A long river of water, of laughter like water. Oh, I love this story.